Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Beyond the Physical Worldwide. I'm very pleased. Today I have an astrologer in the middle. I have Steven Forrest. Welcome, Steven.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I saw that you're an evolutionary astrologer. And I'm very curious about what makes a different evolutionary astrologer with comparison to other astrologers of astrology.
I the easiest way to answer that, probably the most obvious point, would be that we believe in reincarnation. We believe that souls have incarnated on this earth over and over again as we gradually evolve and learn. So we've created a bunch of techniques for understanding the nature of a person's unresolved karma. That's probably the most obvious difference, but there's a slightly different way I would like to say it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people hear this and at first they think I'm insulting them, but that's not the spirit. I invite you to think about how dumb you were 20 years ago. And again, I'm glad you laugh. It's if you weren't dumber 20 years ago, you would have learned nothing and your life would have had no meaning at all. So hopefully all of us have made some progress over the last 20 years. Or what about the last 20 days? You know, that's harder to feel or understand, but it's probably true. What about the last 20 seconds? What have you learned since you and I began this conversation? And again, I couldn't put my finger on that. I couldn't really name it, but it's probably true, because we see it over longer time periods. So minute by minute, we're all evolving. And that's why I call myself an evolutionary astrologer. The purpose of this work is to help people evolve more rapidly and more painlessly.
Okay. And maybe understand each other better and
Yes, oh
understand
yes.
yourself better.
Yeah, for sure, because so much of what we are learning in life, so much of what propels our evolution is our relationships with each other. I mean, there are other things, of course, but that's a huge part of it, maybe the single most important thing. So helping people love each other better, support each other with informed compassion. That's one of my favorite phrases.
Yes, yeah, I understand. Yes, okay. And you have written a couple, lots of books, and you're teaching people and astrologers all around the world. Maybe you can talk a little bit about yourself for the viewers to get to know you, what your road was to this day. Not entirely
Yeah,
complete
so
every day, but
my story outside of astrology is, I'm happy to talk about it.
yeah,
Yeah,
how did you came to this point to become the astrologer that you are now?
well, when I grew up just outside of New York City, so it's a big, crowded, noisy area, and there was so much ground light, just from a city. It was hard to see the stars. But my first memory as a child was wanting a telescope so I could look at the heavens. I had an instinct that somehow I needed to understand the sky. So I spent a long time as an amateur astronomer. I had some telescopes and got pretty good at that. Had a lot of amazing experiences, looking through telescopes at clusters of stars and galaxies and nebulas where stars are being born, and wondering who was looking back at me from out there, and getting the feeling that the cosmos itself was looking back at me.
Okay.
The idea that it's like if I look at a rock as distinct from looking into your eyes, for example, they're very different. We can sense consciousness. We can sense someone looking back at us. It's easy with people, but I got that same feeling looking through the eyepiece of my telescopes. And I
Okay.
think that was what started me on the road to astrology. The scientific explanation of the stars and the galaxies was helpful and interesting and an incredible intellectual triumph. But I just felt that we're missing something, that the universe is alive and we're part of that life.
Wow. And did you study then astronomy in your school career?
Uh, we don't teach it at all, and that's a problem. I wish I could, but I'm teaching my school, the Forrest Center for Evolutionary Astrology. It's an online school, so I'm looking at people's faces just like I'm looking at yours now, and
Yeah.
so we we don't have access to the sky. On a few occasions, I've had a chance to teach astronomy to astrologers outside with a laser pointer, and I love that, but the opportunity doesn't come up very often.
No. Okay. And did you start with the normal astrology, or how do you start with the studies of astrology?
That's I came into it through the two back doors. The first back door was astronomy itself, and the second one, when I was a little boy, I was 13 years old. I met a person I perceived as a woman. I think she was probably 16 or 17, and a woman from Germany, actually, and she taught me palmistry, of the mysteries of the hand. And on your hand, on your palm, there's a plane of the moon and a plane of Saturn and a plane of Jupiter. And even though palmistry and astrology are obviously very different, they hold a common language. The intellectual organization of palmistry and the intellectual organization of astrology are very much the same. And so I was learning astrology before I knew I was learning astrology by learning about palmistry. And
Yeah.
then I was 17 years old, and I was having my tonsils out. It was a little bit later in life. When I was a kid, everybody had that operation when they're very young. But my
Yeah.
mother had let me keep my tonsils, but then they became a problem. Nothing serious, but I was recovering from the operation. I'm in bed at home in high school, and my mother comes in and says, "Can I get you a book?" And I said, "Yes, get me an astrology book." She was a little surprised, but she was okay. She bought me a terrible astrology book. I don't even want to name it because I don't want to insult the author, but it was truly awful. But I knew there was something in it. And then I asked for another one. And she brought me, in this case, I will name the author, mostly somebody's not very well known anymore, Joseph P. Goodovich, who wrote a book called Write Your Own Horoscope. It was actually a huge success. It sold like 1 million copies in it, even though people don't think of it much anymore. And it wasn't evolutionary astrology. It was nothing near that, but at least it went through each of the planets in each of the signs and gave a little personality profile for each one. And
Yeah.
it's like I began to learn how rich a system astrology was. And from that point on, I became completely obsessed with it. And I still am many, many
Yeah. You're
years
completely
later,
sold.
60 years later.
Yes. And you wrote a lot of books yourself, also on the subject.
17.
17 books. Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
But what
yeah.
was your age when you wrote the first one?
Well, let's see. I started writing that one, The Inner Sky, when I was 32 years old. It
Okay.
came out when I was 35. It took a while to write it, but there it was, and it changed my life, completely changed my life.
Yeah. I read it was a bestseller, wasn't it?
In the astrological world, yes, it wasn't a bestseller compared to a page turner beach book or something like that. Astrology books almost never do that. I think Linda Goodman, Sun Signs, I think she still holds the record. I think she sold something like 3 or 4 million copies of that book,
Oh, that's a
but
lot.
it's very rare for an astrology book to
Yes.
get
I
anywhere
wrote
near
it
that.
down. I saw something about the book, how to make your choices wiser choices for a more fulfilling life, it said in that book.
Yeah, that's from The Changing Sky. I believe the subtitle of The Changing Sky. I
Ah,
think, is that it, or was that The Inner Sky?
the inner sky. I thought that
Oh,
was
I'll
the inner
say I have
sky.
them wrong. Yeah,
Yeah.
the The Changing Sky was my second book. It was about transits and progressions. But yes, making choices. It's such a critical idea. So much astrology assumes that you're a puppet and the planets have your strings, and because you're a Gemini you will talk too much, and because you're a Scorpio you're sexy but nobody should trust you, and they sort of go on, and they're they're often trivial characterizations of people, but even worse, they assume that we're powerless in our lives, that if you, me, anyone, I'm sure this is true of you, or you wouldn't be doing this work. If you become aware of a part of yourself that you're not proud of, that isn't working well for you or anybody who's trying to love you, and you become conscious of that and begin to make an effort to change, you can be successful. I'm sure you have been successful. I know I have with things like that. And so people are capable of change. It's such a simple thing to say, but we read astrology book after astrology book, and they never come out and say nobody is capable of change, but they put you in these little boxes as if you're doomed to have this weird personality for the rest of your life. It's just not true. Simply
Oh,
not
okay.
true.
No, I understand. Yeah. And what do you think about the free will in for people in the lives? The free will.
I'm very much in favor of it.
Yeah, I understand that
Yeah,
you're
yes,
saying like this.
yeah. It's the crowning irony is that we're free to not be free. If we choose not to use our free will, well, we're free to not use it. And then I often think fate is what happens to us if we don't use our free will.
Yeah. Yeah, to make the choices. You don't think that the person's life is always in a certain road and that you cannot change it? You can change it any day you like, or any period that you become more consciousness, you can change your life, I understand.
That's the essence of what I believe. I want to be careful to respect the difficulties and challenges of life. I don't want to pretend that they're not there. So what I would say, in fact, what I often literally say to my clients or my students, it's our fate to face certain questions and certain possibilities in life.
Yeah.
And how we respond to those questions, how we answer them, how we navigate those possibilities, that's in the category of freedom. I can be very specific about this. If, for example, in somebody's birth chart, there's a strong focus on the seventh house, a house classically the house of marriage. It's about relationships in general, all sorts of partnerships, not even necessarily romances. But if you have a strong seventh house in your birth chart, I can say it is your fate that you're going to find people coming into your life and having a tremendously powerful impact on you. You think you're going one direction, and you fall in love with somebody, and suddenly you're moving to Australia, even though you never thought you would. And so there's a fate element of, relationships will impact you, and we can count on that. That feels like fate. But I don't like to call it fate. I like to call it the lessons you are learning. And so it's your fate to face the possibility of learning certain lessons in this lifetime. The universe will set up the classroom for you and insist that you enter it And then beyond that, it's up to you. You can make an A in the class or you can fail the class.
Yeah, yeah, I understand because I'm wondering also about the certain of the what do you say this age and the different houses because sometimes we go with my husband. I went to an astrologer, a medium, and everybody was telling him that his work and his heart would be in the foreign countries, not in the Netherlands. And then the last time he went to an astrologer, and she said that his heart and his work would be in the 10th house in the foreign country. So it did blow our mind because everybody was telling it also, and it was in his 10th house also.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it works that way. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it'll just give you goosebumps with the accuracy of it. It's
Yeah.
it gets into such a complex area. Like this is closely related. There's a phenomenon called time twins, where two people are born basically at the same place and same time, so they have the same chart effectively. Some astrologers say all charts are completely unique. It's not exactly true. People can have very similar charts, and when they do, they often don't even know each other. I mean, can you name anybody who was born the same day as you in the same hospital? Most of us can't. But when they do meet, there's often incredible parallels in their lives. That they have the same number of children, they got married on the same day, things like this, and it's like from almost any astrologer hears these stories and they get very excited. I mean, this proves that this stuff works, and it's kind of a poison pill because built into it is a sort of endorsement of a fatalistic view of astrology. Your chart made you have 3 children, not 2, not 4, but 3, and it's just really complicated. The fact that you can make predictions and sort of describe people with astrology is true, but it's like the silver. And if you want the gold, you have to look at the chart as something reflecting the karmic predicament of the soul and the evolutionary intentions of the soul. And beyond that, we can respond in freedom and creativity.
Yes. I think then when somebody telling you something that you always have to feel your intuitive side, that you feel that it's your karmic thing and that your soul has to do this in your life. And if it's not resonating, maybe then somebody's can letting it go and the other one can follow the path. Then they feel, oh, that's just me, what he just told me.
Yeah, I
Is that
agree
is that
with you
right? Do
completely
you?
about that. Sometimes I startle people at astrology gatherings by saying, no one needs astrology. Nobody needs it. That it's quite possible to navigate our lives with our hearts, with our intuitive functions. I never want to pretend that isn't true. Many people disbelieve in astrology and live wonderful, loving, creative lives, without it.
Yeah.
And so, I say that it doesn't always win me popularity contests among astrologers, but I think it's true. And then I take it a step further, and I realize that all of us are under enormous distorting pressures, from society, social expectations. A simple situation I could point to. Long ago, they taught you how to be a girl. They taught me how to be a boy, and there's all that loaded cultural stuff about gender. It taught me how to be, a boy from America. They taught you how to be a girl from the Netherlands, I gather. And, and,
Yeah.
and, uh, so cultural training, and it's not always negative. We receive culture and learn poetry and art and beauty and all sorts of wondrous things, but we also get a lot of distortion. So we have a real self, and then we have this training that impacts us, and it's hard to sort it out. And astrology helps us sort that out, helps us know who we really are and what's really going to work for us, what's going to make
Yeah, yeah, what they expect of us, of course. Also, yeah,
Yeah,
because other people expect things from you, and if you
yeah,
follow
yeah,
your heart,
yeah.
I'm a homeopath for my profession also, and I choose remedies for people to heal with homeopathy, and I sometimes use a little bit of astrology with AI, maybe a little bit, but and then they point it out, and then it fits with each other. But I think it's the right remedy. It fits also with the astrology points
Yeah,
of the person, and I
yes, yes,
find it such a great thing to match also.
yes. It's wonderful how all these different systems will point in the same direction. They
Yeah.
validate each other, improve each other.
Yes. And do you think that the where we are now in the world, in the timeline, there's like a little bit of I don't know the sign what it was, like maybe the waterman or something, that it's going to be far more easy to connect with each other worldwide, and that we are in a timeline that is going to be easier. Is that also the case if you look at the big picture?
If everything I've been saying comes down to freedom and personal responsibility. And so if we respond well to Pluto in Aquarius, I suspect is one of the things you're talking about here. If we respond well to that collectively, yes, then much more of a sense of community. If we respond poorly to it, which we're free to do, it could actually have the opposite effect of separating people. And so it's just such a wonderful sort of teaching moment here where people interviewing me will often, basically ask me to make a prediction. Pluto's going into Aquarius. What's going to happen? And it's a perfectly understandable question. It's a perfectly fair question. But I don't think astrology can answer it very definitively. Once again, we can describe the questions and we can give advice and guidance, and then people do as they choose.
Yeah, it's just like the energy of the period is like that. The energy is more that it's coming into the open, that people can maybe connect in this time of life, and
Yes.
that people can respond yes or no to this, of course.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes.
So specifically, or we can go into this a bit, Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto takes 248 years to get around the sun, so its entry in a sign, it's a big deal. It's not been there for 2.5 centuries, so here it is. And Aquarius, when we get it right, it's like the idea that each person is different, each person is unique, each person looks at the world in their own way. And so Aquarius at its best is a celebration of diversity. Isn't it
Mm.
isn't it wonderful that Italian people are different than Dutch people, and they're all different from Danish people and Americans, and isn't it wonderful that we have Arabs and Muslims and
Yeah.
Hindu people and Chinese people? Isn't this grand? Isn't it fun to be human? That's a
Yeah.
that's an Aquarian attitude at its best, a celebration of diversity. But of course, humans have not always celebrated diversity. Okay,
No.
that's Aquarius. Pluto. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and there's a clue there. This represented generationally the collective discovery of the unconscious mind. This is when people began to think psychologically. Jung and Freud and all that had done their early work, and it was beginning to catch on. And so Pluto, think of psychotherapy. And it's like to enter psychotherapy can be really good for people, but it's
Mhm.
scary. We know it's going to make us miserable, some of
Mm.
the times, and it may be worth it, as we face things we don't want to face our shadow, face our woundedness. Pluto always asks us to do that. So humanity is invited now with Pluto and Aquarius to look at the problems it has respecting human diversity and perhaps heal them. And so these problems come to the surface synchronistically, and so we see lots of prejudice and hatred and Nazis rising and all this terrifying stuff, and it's part of the healing process. It's like we have to look at this, and I think presently, I mean, Pluto is only 4 or 5 degrees into Aquarius, 25 degrees to go. It's in 2044 or something when it finally finishes. So we're in the
Huh?
early stages of this process, and we see the horrible headlines where so much is driven by prejudice and judgment. What we don't see, but we need to talk about, is the people, the individuals who are doing better than that. Like somewhere, uh, a person who's a white person who's never been friends with a black person before is making friends with a black person, and just each seeing the other as human. That's happening. People bridging these connections to each other. And as usual, what makes the news is the horrible side of things, and yet the real purpose, what puts the smile on the face of the angels. We don't hear that on the news, but it's happening. It's happening.
Wow. Yes.
2044, we'll see if we've gotten this one right or wrong.
Yes, I understand. And if there's a certain period between now and 2044 and it's just 5%, would it be like that you're going to see it much more and much more? And then how do you expect it to be then in 2044 that this
Hmm,
period is going to be
yeah.
entering a new period again?
Well, again, I want to give an unsatisfactory answer, which is I don't know. I don't know what to expect because I'm a human, and I'm part of this species, and I know how crazy we are, and how unpredictable we are, and how sometimes humans do excellently, shockingly well, and other times they're absolute catastrophes. We get World War II, the giant slaughter, and then we get the fall of apartheid in South Africa, for example, the
Yeah,
rise of liberation movements for women, for gay people. Humans were capable of miracles, and we're capable of tragedies. And what will we do? I don't know. I
yeah.
just know what the questions are.
Yeah, yeah. I hope everybody chooses the right path and the right way, that we connect with each other, dark or white. It doesn't matter. We are all human. So that's far more important to know, of course. Yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
can you maybe tell us a little bit about the different houses? Because I read like maybe the 11th house is like the people you speak to, the people who listen to you maybe, or the second and the eighth house is about making money or things like that. Can you maybe a little bit tell about the houses?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. In fact, let me even a little more broadly. I want to say that astrology is a symbol system, obviously, but more precisely, it's 3 symbol systems. We get planets, signs, and houses, and these 3 symbol systems interlock. To understand the planets, I want to keep this fairly short because this could easily turn into astrology school, but just very simply, so Sigmund Freud decided the basic structure of the human psyche, the ego, the id or the unconscious, and the superego, telling us how to be a good person. And he made this model, and so everybody's consciousness is structured around these 3 principles. He can make a good argument for it. In astrology, we do the same thing, except it's a bit more granular. You have a sun, you have a moon, you have a Mercury. Each is different, like Venus, the urge to love, to exchange love. There's lots of different ways to do that, but
Yes.
everybody has a Venus. Everybody has some need for human connection. We could go through each planet, and it's like the structure of the psyche. And then
Mm.
each of those planets is given a set of drives or motivations that are particular to it because of the sign it's in. So, for example, Venus, that urge to connect. Gemini is a sign that is drawn to wide experience. And so if you have Venus in Gemini, you're probably going to kiss a lot more people in this life than if you have Venus in Cancer. Cancer is much more oriented to, kind of special long-term relationship, less focused on diversity. God bless everybody with Venus in Gemini. God bless everybody with Venus in Cancer. They're just different paths. And then houses tend to be behavioral. So it's like if we have this planet in this sign, we have that need, that motivation. What are we going to do about it? How will it show up in our life biographically? Where do we explore it? And the houses are like rooms in a house that we enter and we behave in them or misbehave in them. So we are our signs and we do our houses. So these are the way the three symbol systems interact.
Yes. Okay. And what kind of houses can you tell us? What kind of houses and what are the themes of the houses?
Yes, well, let's see. I could, would you like me to go through all 12 quickly? I'd be happy to. Is that what
Yes.
you, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in the first house starts with the ascendant. It's how we dawn on people. You put together a style, a way of being there in the world. The second house, traditionally, house of money, but it's really about confidence in yourself and the resources you need in order to feel legitimate and feel like you have what it takes. The third house, we're learning to speak and, just as importantly, how to listen. It's a communication house. Fourth house is related to home and roots and, deeper connections with people and deeper connection with yourself. It's very psychological. Fifth house is self-expressive. There are a lot of creative people. People can fill up a stage. We'll have fifth house energy. So the spiritual path of creative self-expression. Sixth house is connected to duties and responsibilities, for one thing. There's also a big part of this sixth house that I like to talk about because it's mostly forgotten. It's the human need to have a mentor, to have like traditionally, aunts and uncles and their nieces and nephews were in the sixth house, and in traditional cultures there's a mentoring, guiding kind of specialness to that relationship. So the receiving of guidance and the offering of it later in life. Sixth house. Seventh house, I mentioned marriage, classically, all our connections, all our partnerships. Eighth house, traditionally the house of death. Well, we all die and we all have to deal with it, and death can be a powerful teacher for us. And it's a little bigger than that. It's everything intense in life. Everything that creates strong emotions is in the eighth house. Ninth house, expanding horizons. It's travel and learning, universities, and everything that stretches us. 10th house, often called the house of career. I prefer to call it the house of our mission in the world. And if you got a planet up there, you're going to have an impact on your community. That's part of what you've signed up to do. It doesn't mean fame, but you'll do something there in the bigger world. 11th house, house of friends is the classic name for it, misleading term. Friends, as we would use the words, really more seventh house. 11th house, friends like you have 1,000 of them. You can't remember half their names, if you're part of an organization or a group of people. It's also connected to development over time. Planets in the 11th house tend to get a lot more powerful as we get older. If I sit with somebody who's got a really strong 11th house, lots of planets there, I'll often say something to them that almost always puts a smile on their face. It's that the great work of this lifetime for you is not the work of a young person. The work of the young person is the learning, and then you blossom later in life. 12th house is the last house, obviously. It's, in a sense, it's the highest of the houses. It's the mystical, spiritual house. It's the house that in which we find the power in ourselves to let go of our ego, let go of our identity, and enter, pass through the doorway into the non-physical realms. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's the circle.
Okay, that's very beautiful. Of course, like a human's life, and then translate it into a kind of map also.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a map that works. It's the amazing thing is that astrology works, that the planets are affecting us. It's like often people don't believe in astrology. They'll laugh at that. They'll say, we now know the planets are millions of miles away. How could they possibly have any effect? I love it when somebody tries to make fun of me with that line. Here's how I come back. I say, so go out at night and look at the sky. And there's what looks like a bright star. Maybe it's Venus, maybe it's Jupiter. And I have sort of two punches here. Here's the first punch. I say, that doesn't affect you? It's sort of an emotional argument, but, people from the beginning of time have looked at the sky and been amazed. That's why we say heaven is up there. Heaven isn't in the sky. Heaven is another dimension, but we feel the sense of the magic up there. And of course, it affects us. But then here's the second punch. The person who says that the planets can't affect us. That bright star, Jupiter. We have energy coming from Jupiter at 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light, crashing into your eyeballs and creating measurable biochemical changes in your brain, which is just a fancy way of saying we can see it.
Yes.
The idea that the planets do not affect us is simply incorrect. It's just wrong. If they couldn't affect us, we couldn't see them. And the premise upon which astrology rests, even from a scientific framework, is that we suggest that our interactions with the solar system are more complex than simply through our eyes. And there's not a reasonable person in the world who would hear that and say anything other than, show me what you have. Show me the rest of your argument. It doesn't prove anything except that maybe we should look at this a little more carefully.
Yes, yes, I understand. Yes. And how could you describe a consultation that you have with the person who's coming with to you, if they believe or not, they coming to you? And what are you looking at the person? What can you bring them? What can if they
Mhm.
walk out of the room again?
Yeah. I've done more readings than I can remember. That's how I've made my living all my
Maybe you don't
life.
do
And
readings anymore. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. There must be 50,000 or something like that,
Wow.
even counting the little ones, so
Wow.
lots and lots. I'm a Capricorn, so I work all the time. And this has been my work all my life. But,
Yeah.
I, you know, the, I think the main thing that people get from me is a confirmation of what they already know about themselves. It's like people often say, You didn't tell me anything I didn't already know, but thank you, because it's just like a validated, energize it a bit for them, give them a little bit more faith in what they know as distinct from what everybody else around them wants to think about who they are. And so that's a lot of it. Um, I find, with evolutionary astrology in particular, when we talk about the past life story, the reincarnation, the unresolved issues from a prior life, this karma has ripened, which means like the fruit falls from the tree. When karma ripens, it manifests. And so it's just a little scene that's repeated many, many times in my life. I'm telling a person what I see about their unresolved prior life. And they say, wait a minute, are you sure you're talking about a past life? That just happened to me last year. And I say, yeah. See, karma is basically repetition Uh, Albert Einstein had a famous definition of insanity, and it was doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different result, each time.
Yeah.
And that's karma, habits. I laugh at myself. I say, there are lessons I have learned hundreds of times. And of course, if hundreds of times, perhaps I haven't learned anything. That's the joke is on me. And that's true of all of us, that we all have features in our lives like that. And we can get to the essence of them by it's sort of a technical analysis built around the south node of the moon. I could get too windy about that. But here's an example. Just very simply, this will all be in plain English. Let's say there's a little boy. He's like, 4 or 5 years old. And 2 or 3 times a week, he wakes up the family with screaming nightmares. At 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, he's terrified, and the family has to come in and help him. And of course, we feel compassion for the child, but we're also kind of worried about the child, that there's something wrong with this kid. Maybe you want to bring the child psychologist who puts a label on what's wrong with this kid, as they often do. Okay, well, just let that sit there for a moment. We go to the astrologer, and we would see a structure in the chart that would, for example, suggest that this child was killed in warfare and died in a state of terrible fear. An Aries south node squared by Mars. I mean, we could get technical about it, but we can see that signature in the chart. And notice how immediately, upon realizing that this poor kid died in terror in a war, of course, anybody who dies in terror in a war comes into the next life scared, because that emotion is so deep. And the point that I'm really getting at here is how instead of giving this child a psychiatric label,
Hmm.
paranoid schizophrenia or something like that, we see him through the eyes of compassion and
Yes.
understanding. And of course, anyone who went through what he went through would show these same features. And so how do we help him? We have compassion for his condition, and we are struggling to help him find peace. I mean, we could get pretty specific about how to do that, but that's the basic idea, where instead of a psychiatric label, we have compassionate understanding. And in many ways, that's the greatest gift that anyone who comes to me for a reading can get, because we all have unresolved karma. It's not always as dramatic as that child, but something where we'll look at an uncomfortable feature of our lives, but we'll look at ourselves with more compassionate understanding. We're less likely to label ourselves crazy or there's something wrong with me, but we see where it came from and we see the process of how to fix it.
Yeah, I understand. I do also photo readings, like psychic photo readings, and I see that sometimes like past lives influences the person as well, and then I can prescribe them the correct remedy in homeopathy to heal that emotion inside. So I
Yes,
also prescribe yeah, homeopathy above lives, so at the soul level also.
yeah,
So
yes.
that's a very good one. And do
Well,
you think that people then choose the exact time and moment of the birth according to that thing that happened to them,
I
according to the
think that
karma?
I believe that's a complicated question. I, 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 I think that after we've left this body, after we've left this world, and we enter the next realms, as you know, they're diverse. There are lots of different places we can go, different states of consciousness, and I think a more evolved soul, a more advanced soul, for such a person, we can talk about them choosing their next incarnation, probably in consultation with their guides and teachers on the other side. For a less advanced soul, I think the process is more automatic. The way the Eastern religions, Buddhism in particular, would talk about the winds of karma. Blow the person into the next womb. It's often said by psychics I've listened to that the less advanced souls tend to reincarnate rather quickly and automatically. The more advanced ones may hang back for a while and get a little rest, a
Yeah,
little
and
break
decide
from the
to.
madness. And is
Yes.
that have you come to similar conclusions in your inner work?
Yes, I understand. Yes. I last time I had a photo reading because there was a woman I know that was pregnant of her baby like a couple of weeks, but then the baby stopped with the heartbeat, but it didn't leave the body of the woman, and she wanted photo reading to check this the soul want me to know if, anything. And I got a message that the person that she was like a perfectionist, and she wanted to schedule her astrology like a half year later. She wanted to come to the family half year later, but she wanted to let her mother know that she had to have a third child. Don't want to leave the family, but she wanted to come later. So I thought, oh, that's a bit strange, mom, but it was like a little bit astrology in
Yeah.
there.
Yes, yes. They're fortunate to have you in the mixture in the conversation.
Yeah, yeah, the mixture, yeah, and then she maybe had a little better like the stars when she was coming, of course.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and I have another question. I saw that you also wrote books, like 4 books, and it's about, I am going to read it here, the different things like water and fire and like the
Oh,
fourth
yes.
energies. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah, I'd love to. So, I've written a lot of books, and I saw Saturn was about to enter Capricorn, which is going to have a big effect on me. A lot of astrologers think of Saturn as a bad planet. It's not. It's not bad, it's hard. And with Saturn, you have a choice of being exhausted or being depressed. And I'd say, go ahead and be exhausted, so it's time to do something big, do something difficult. So I saw it was going to enter Capricorn, and I'm thinking, what should I do? Write a book? Well, that used to scare me some, the idea of writing a book, but not anymore because I've written so many of them. I needed to do something harder than that. So it came to me. It's almost like my guides and teachers whispered in my ear and said, write down everything you know about astrology. And I said, no, you're crazy. That could possibly write. I mean, that's a lot. I've been studying this stuff no, write it down. And so, okay, I'll try. And so I wrote these 4 books that are basically pretty close to everything I know about astrology. The book of fire, the book of earth, the book of air, and the book of water. That's what I titled them. Specifically, say the book of fire, we have 3 fire signs, Aries and Leo and Sagittarius, and I go into deep detail about them. They correspond to the 1st house, the 5th house, and the 9th house. They're the 1st, 5th, and 9th signs. So details about those 3 houses. Each of those signs is ruled by a planet. So we have Mars and the Sun and Jupiter. So the book of fire goes into all of those symbols. And then the book of earth, I
Interesting.
did the same thing, and so on. And here's the most amazing thing. This is synchronicity. This just shocked me. So, I the foundation of a birth chart, the skeleton of the birth chart, in my view, is what I call the primal triad: the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. I always like to start with those. You get the basic structure, then add flesh and hair to the skeleton with the planets. There's a reason I'm saying this. So we have 12 times 12 times 12 possibilities there, with the signs, planets, and houses,
Yeah.
and we get therefore 1,728 possible combinations of sun, moon, and ascendant. Okay,
Yeah.
1,728, 12 to the third power. This sounds pretty boring so far, but watch what happens. So I'd finished these books, sent them off. They're manufactured, typeset. I have nothing to do with that. And something came up where I needed to know the total number of pages in those 4 books. The answer was 1,728 pages.
Oh, that
Wow.
is great. Yeah. Yeah. Not a coincidence.
Yeah, a coincidence, synchronicity, a
Yeah.
sign from God. It just
Yeah.
it took my breath away when I realized that.
Yes. Oh, it sounds great. Yes. I'm a Leo, so I would be in the book of the fire.
Yes, yeah,
Yes. Oh, I think lots of people can learn a lot about from you about astrology.
yeah,
And
yes.
I wanted almost to finish our conversation, but I saw that on your website you also give courses. And I believe it's tomorrow. Yeah, when we transfer this, it's not tomorrow anymore, of course. But like Jupiter in Leo, something like that.
Yeah, in fact, tomorrow morning I'll be doing a webinar, local time tomorrow morning, about Jupiter entering Leo. Forrestastrology.com.
Yeah, we
Anybody
will
could
put it in the
could
link.
sign up
Yes.
there if they wanted to. Um,
Yeah.
and even later on, because they're always up on the website, for people to listen to later if they feel like it.
Yes.
Jupiter entered Leo on June 29th. So it's just recently there, stays there until late July of 2027.
Okay. Can you give a
Traditionally,
glimpse of what people can learn about this,
yeah,
maybe?
sure. Here's a few words about it. It's like Jupiter traditionally is the lucky planet. But and we say all that glitters is not gold, or be careful what you pray for, you might get it. Those sorts of comments are the more cautionary understanding of Jupiter in general. We tend to get what we want. So wise desire, knowing what's good for us is a good start here. And Jupiter and Leo, I mean, each individual will respond in their own way to this. So I'm going to speak in very general terms, but wise desire here would be a desire to learn the lessons of Leo. And here's the essence of Leo as a spiritual path. I'm going to start off with just a very specific example, and then we're going to learn a little bit about it more generally. But I'm going to imagine I have fallen in love with a woman. Now, I am in love with a woman, but this is just a story.
Yes.
But so I fall in love with a woman, early stages of our relationship, and she's won my heart. And I say to her for the first time, I love you. And she looks a little awkward and says, well, Steve, I'm fond of you too. I hope we can always be friends. And it's like,
Oh, gee. Oh, gee.
so, I took this terrible risk of making my heart vulnerable and saying, I love you. And I know it's a risk. And if it doesn't work, it's going to really hurt. Of course, if she says, I love you, we're both really happy. But vulnerability This is the heart of Leo. In pop astrology, Leo is always noisy, and you've probably read stuff about it. It's top of my list for the most misunderstood sign of the zodiac. Leo work is about learning to express yourself creatively, learning to be brave enough to put your heart out there, what you think is beautiful or sacred or holy, knowing that if you put it out there and people don't like it, it's going to hurt, and doing it anyway. So people with Jupiter and Leo, opportunities will come up for everybody to risk that kind of vulnerable self-expression. And I encourage everybody, take the chance. One expression of it, very central, would be, when we're creative, if you write a poem or a song and reveal it to somebody, it's almost like saying, I love you. If they don't like your poem or they're not touched by it, that hurts. So taking that risk of being authentic and vulnerable, go for it. That's Jupiter and Leo.
Ah, very good. Yes. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I think everybody should go to your website and see what kind of courses you have on the website and learn about
Thank
it,
you.
and so they can come along in what is in the past. You say this is between the end of the June and then till 27, you said?
Yeah, July of 27, late July.
Yeah. Yes. So it's good to know. It's so bad that so bad. It's just that people that children don't learn this in the school, don't you think?
Oh, I wish they could. I wish they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can learn a
They,
lot about it. They can learn a lot about themselves, but what they are in the world, what they have to do, what they are good at, and what their desire is going to be, or they feel it, what they are going to be. So that would be great. But
yeah.
we as an adults, we have the YouTube channels, and we can teach each other. So
Yes, yes.
yes. Yeah,
Uh,
that's what I love to hear. So I love to speak with you, and I wanted to thank you very much for this nice interview and your
Thank you.
information that you're.
I've enjoyed it too, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Yes. And for our viewers, I want to say if you like this kind of conversations, you can like and subscribe on this channel and maybe forward it to other persons who will see it, of course. And also about astrology and other things that are like spiritual matters. And hope to see you in the next one, of course. Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye bye.